G'day and welcome to Inside Rugby with Mark. If you haven't been here before, I'm a Kiwi guy living in beautiful Cancun in Mexico, and this is my rugby channel talking about the sport that I love. In this video we're going to talk about that amazing semi-final game between England and South Africa, so stick around. So welcome back to the channel for those that are regular viewers, and to everybody that's here for the first time, you're welcome here in this rugby community around the world that we're building on Inside Rugby. And I'd just like to say before I start today, a huge thank you to everyone who bothered to send me well wishes over the last days while I've been fighting off a terrible virus that we all know about. And I'm slowly on the road to recovery, but we can't stay sat down for too long, can we, when there's all this rugby on? So I'm getting back into it. Now, before this game between England and South Africa got away at the Stade de France on Saturday night, there was a lot of things going on that really interested me. First of all, the weather. And yes, it was wet and windy in Paris as autumn starts to fall on that city. And we were starting to see some of the conditions more aligned to our beautiful game of rugby. And that was going to play a factor, of course, in the strategy of this game. But I really thought that this game's competition got underway before the ball was even kicked off. And it was during the national anthems. And if you saw Maro Itoje and Sia Kalesi from their respective teams going at it, you would have seen there was a huge passion committed from both of those two guys anyway to their national anthems, and that was fantastic to see. So that was round one for me. England had really turned up and they were going to put something out there against South Africa in this game. Now, Ben O'Keefe was the referee from this game. The Kiwi was in charge of what was going to be surely a difficult match to referee because of the conditions and probably because of the strategies that the teams were going to play. So we had to see how that one was going to play out as well. Now, before the game got underway, I checked my community page here on my channel, and 91% of you were backing the Springboks in this one. So it was going to be very interesting to see how that unfolded as well. So in my analysis today, I'm going to once again look at each 20-minute segment of the game. And the game got underway with England really showing some emphasis in the first minute or two. In fact, in the first 70 seconds, they were right down in the Springboks 22 and ended up getting a penalty. And many of us thought that this was going to be the strategy that England needed to bring to this game to have any chance at all, and they started off demonstrating that passion that they had, the energy. They were up for this game, and they got down and put early pressure on the South Africans and earned themselves a penalty. So Owen Farrell got up within that 70-second mark and actually got the penalty over. So England went straight out to 3 points to nil, and the question for me was going to be, okay, if England are going to adopt this attitude and play this style of game, could they last the whole 80 minutes in doing it? That was going to be the big question mark. So a great start from England. They all looked up for it, in fact, and it was a great set of strategy, I thought, going in with the selection of this team as well. Joe Marler was in there for England in the front row. A little bit of a different look and an ability to get him around the field a little bit more. But England were trying to take South Africa on up in the front. And we saw Martin come in at the lock as well, as I spoke about in the preview video, and Ollie Chisholm, who's been playing really, really well, put on the bench for this particular game. But was that going to make a difference later on when Chisholm came on and Martin went off? We'd have to find out later on in the game. So England out to 3-0 just after 90 seconds of the game. And then another important moment early on in the game, 5th minute, first scrum. It was going to be interesting to see who had the domination, or if anybody created domination in the scrums early on. And that first scrum was pretty even. I think Ben O'Keefe did a pretty good job in laying down the law and getting both of these teams, even though he was taking time to do that. He was making sure that we were going to get a fair contest, at least to start off with, in the scrums. And that combination for South Africa of Kitsoff, Bonami and Malherbe were looking at seeing if they could put some pressure on England in that first scrum, but it didn't actually work. And then the play continued, and we saw England going for that strategy again, and it was a very, very good play. The ball would come out to Alex Mitchell. He did quite a bit of box kicking in the early part of this game, and when he had time free, he got the ball out to Farrell, who also did some kick for territorial gain. Now in the 9th minute, England were down again in South Africa's territory, and it was the same old repeat and play again from England, and it was working because South Africa were being moved backwards and England were controlling possession of the ball and doing it very, very well. I was really impressed with the way England were going down into the collisions early on in this game. Tom Curry was really up for this game. Ben Earl was up for it. Courtney Laws was doing big stuff. Itoje was in there as well. This was a team effort from England, and they were all going into it very, very hard to get the ball back, and they were winning turnover ball as well at this stage of the game. So in the 9th minute, down in the South African territory again, another opportunity for a penalty, indiscretion from South Africa, and that man, Owen Farrell, stepped up again, and England went out to 6-0 after 9 minutes. And it wasn't until around about the 13th or 14th minute mark that I felt South Africa started to get a little bit of possession in this game, and maybe they had ridden that wave of England enthusiasm in the early part of the game. We see that, don't we, in quite a lot of rugby games where one team comes out absolutely firing and then the momentum starts to shift, and that's what I started to feel was happening around about the 13th minute of this game. But then South Africa did some really interesting things that I thought that either were fantastic strategically, or maybe they might regret it a little bit deeper into the game, and that was when they got a penalty down in the English half, they decided to kick for touch. And as we know, the South Africans put a lot of pride into their forward rolling line-out mauls and their set-piece play close to the opposition line. So I thought this was an opportunity for them to use that tactic and see whether they could come away with points. So Manny Lebok took the kick for touch, put South Africa down on attack, and we had to wait and see whether they could capitalise from that opportunity. And as England had already started the game off, each time they got down into the South African territory, they were able to come away with points. They didn't on that occasion, and England cleared the ball, but it wasn't long. It was only a minute or so later when they got another opportunity to go back down there. So Manny Lebok put another kick for touchdown to the 22 of England, and South Africa found themselves on attack again. In between a couple of points of play there, Freddie Stewart was being tested under the high ball, and he was doing a magnificent job in very, very difficult conditions. The ball was greasy, there was wind swirling around the Stade de France on Saturday evening, and it was a real test for anybody under the high ball. But there was a couple of opportunities in that first 15 minutes that Freddie Stewart stood up for England and gave amazing account for himself, collecting those high balls, standing tall in the tackle and recycling the ball cleanly for England, which was going to be a big part of this game, you thought. So just on the 20-minute mark of the first half, with England up 6-0, they were close to the halfway line, and there was an indiscretion from England, and they gave away a penalty. And Owen Farrell was playing some kind of silly little game by not giving the ball back to South Africa, who obviously going to kick for touch at that stage. And Ben O'Keefe asked Farrell on a couple of occasions to hurry up and give the ball back to South Africa. He mouthed off again, Owen Farrell, and consequently Ben O'Keefe walked him back 10 metres. And this changed the decision for South Africa. They decided then Manny Lebok was going to take a kick for goal, and he was successful on the 20-minute mark, and South Africa were back to 6-3. A crucial, ill-disciplined move from Owen Farrell on that particular occasion cost his team 3 points. So at the end of the first 20 minutes of this game, and I felt it was all England, and I gave them the first 20 minutes of this particular game. They were very good going forward. They had their game plan. It wasn't going to be pretty rugby, but they weren't here to play pretty rugby. They were here to win a semi-final of the Rugby World Cup in 2023. And they kept South Africa under pressure. They kept the ball in hand. They went to their strengths. Alex Mitchell was very, very good with his box kicking, I thought. Kept turning South Africa around whenever they got any opportunity. And we didn't even see the outside backs for South Africa in this game at all at this stage. And the likes of Damian Zealander and Jesse Krill, who we saw so much of last week, were basically missing in action because of the strategy that England were playing at this part of the game. So there we go, England the first quarter given to them, 6-3 on the scoreboard, and looking much more dominant with their strategy that they were playing. And it looked like South Africa hadn't really yet clicked into gear, and they were finding it quite difficult on how to repel this particular English strategy in these particular conditions. So we started off the second quarter of the game, and it was pretty much like the first quarter started, and England were just in control and they looked comfortable with what they were doing, and it was perfect England conditions, I must say, for this particular game, because the boys had obviously played in these conditions many times and knew how to play in these conditions. So it was really suiting England very well, and it was only a couple of minutes into the quarter where they got another penalty by once again being down in that South African territory, and Owen Farrell stepped up and took that and was successful. So all of a sudden we had England out to 9 points to 3, and they were keeping that scoreboard ticking over, and I think that was the crux of the game at this stage, because England needed to make sure that every time they went down to the South African territory they came away with something, and it was a successful strategy already 20 odd minutes into the game. So I'm thinking Steve Borthwick would be very happy at this stage. We saw glimpses of Jacques Nienaber and Rassie Erasmus yelling in the coach's box on the microphones down to their crew on the side of the field, and I'm sure there was all sorts of strategies being talked about, because South Africa had to find solutions to what England was throwing at them, and what they had been doing up until this stage wasn't working. And then on the 30th minute, something really interesting happened. They decided, that being Jacques Nienaber and Rassie Erasmus, decided to pull the ripcord and bring Manny Lebok off and put Andre Pollard on, and I thought this was a very interesting but also very brave move. Remember that the South Africans had 3 on the bench in the backs for this game, and by putting Andre Pollard on very early in the game, it was meaning that they were leaving themselves potentially a little bit exposed at the back if they needed reserves later on in the game. But this was obviously a strategic move, getting Pollard on. Manny Lebok had done those few kicks for touch when they got penalties. I don't know whether that was the right strategy to do. I probably would have taken the 3 points on offer in these particular conditions, but that's the way that South Africa had been playing this all tournament long. They wanted to get down there and put forward domination pressure on their opponents, but it hadn't been working out in the beginning of this game. So Pollard on for Lebok. Lebok looked a little bit dejected as he went to the bench, but in Andre Pollard, South Africa had brought on a game changer and somebody who's got all that experience from previous World Cups. So it was a great move, I thought, to bring Pollard on at that time. Only time would tell whether or not it was a masterstroke. Now a few minutes later we had Tom Curry going off for England. He had a blood bin concern. He got cut pretty badly on the nose, and Billy Vunipola came on for England as a blood bin replacement, and in his very first touch in the game he dropped the ball and gave it away to South Africa in an attacking position. So Vunipola didn't have the start to the game that he would have wanted, dropping that ball. A few phases later, South Africa ended up remaining on attack and getting a penalty. Pollard stepped up for his first kick at goal, a relatively easy one, and all of a sudden South Africa were back to 9 points to 6. So I think they would have been a little bit more content at that stage that there was a little bit of parity coming back into the game. And more importantly, South Africa had an opportunity to get down into the English territory and put some pressure on England. Remember, up until this stage, South Africa had been doing a lot of tackling and had been spending a lot of time back in their own territory under the English pressure from the high ball. But that was about it for that part of the game for South Africa, and England once again went back down using that sweeping kick from Owen Farrell to give them a territorial gain. And when South Africa did clear it, then Alex Mitchell would get the ball from set pieces and do a box kick and put England back down on the attack. And what I liked about the strategy from England is they were using both Mitchell and Farrell strategically to get that ball down. So that created a little bit of doubt in the South African defence, and we saw Etzebeth getting caught offside at one stage when he was going after Alex Mitchell, and it was just giving South Africa a little bit of a nightmare when it came to choosing who was going to be the kicker on these respective jobs. So I thought Alex Mitchell was doing a really good job for England in that first 35 minutes of the game. And then, as we always say, those few minutes before halftime and after halftime are crucial in these big games, or all games. And it was England that went on down into the South African territory and came away with another penalty, and Owen Farrell stepped up again to get his fourth for the first half and put England out to 12 points to 6. So So that was the halftime score, 12-6, and again, that 20 minutes I gave to England. They won it on the scoreboard, but they also won it by the continuation of their strategy. And I think there would have been a lot of nervous South Africans in the crowd and back at home thinking, well, we've got to come up with a key to crack this code, because England, if they keep doing this, then they have a very good chance of winning this game. And I think there would have been a lot of discussion around that in the sheds at halftime for the South Africans. How were they going to crack this code? And don't forget, they had that bomb squad sitting on the bench that they thought was going to make a huge impact to this game. And they also still had Willie le Roux and Faf de Klerk for the backs to come on as well. So it's going to be a question for me how quickly the South African coaching team were going to use those two players in the second half. For England in the first half, they had a lot of good players. Mitchell was really good, as I said. Farrell was playing a really good game, and he was just kicking fantastically in the conditions. But the forwards for me were really, really impressive. And the likes of Courtney Laws, Maro Itoje, we had Martin as well doing some great things in the line-out. But Ben Earl, Tom Curry in the back three, along with Courtney Laws, were really, really being massive in the breakdowns, and they were putting everything on the line. We saw that a couple of times with Itoje sliding in and putting his body on the line to get ball back from England. So a really good performance by England in that first 40 minutes. They came with their game plan. As I said, it wasn't the open spectacle of rugby that we'd probably expect to see at a Rugby World Cup, but it was England trying to win a semi-final at this year's Rugby World Cup, and they were doing exactly what they needed to do. So kudos to them. And I think Steve Borthwick would have said to them at halftime, look boys, we've got this. If we do another 40 minutes of this, we can keep the pressure on, keep in South Africa territory, come away with the points when we can, and we're going to have a very good chance of winning this game. So it was very early on in the second half that Jacques Nienaber and Rassie Erasmus pulled the parachute cord again and started to ring the changes for South Africa. And this was really interesting. I was starting to wonder whether this was panicking or whether this was part of the strategic play that they had for this game, because we saw Cobus Reinhardt go off first and Faf de Klerk coming on. Then Damien Willemse went off and Willie le Roux came on. Then we saw R.G. Snyman come on as well. So they were ringing in the changes, South Africa, and hoping that these players all had an impact. Cobus Reinhardt didn't really do too much in the first half for South Africa, and I think they missed that Faf de Klerk presence on the field. I just think he has that connection with his forwards and can manage them around the forward area well. But I think the problem in the first half with South Africa was England was just controlling the game. They were just playing smart rugby. They were keeping possession of the ball. They were putting South Africa under pressure with high kicks. And when South Africa responded with high kicks of their own, England were just eating them up. And Freddie Stewart, as I said, once again, was brilliant at the back for England in making sure they came back with some opportunity from those high kicks as well. He just wasn't catching them and going to ground. He was actually making a darting run for 10 or 15 metres and then turning England around on the front foot, which allowed his kickers, whether it be Alex Mitchell or Owen Farrell, to get some positive momentum going forward for the English forwards again. So that was something I was really watching in this game. It was working really effectively for England. So a host of changes for South Africa very early on in the first 5 minutes of the second half, and it was going to be interesting to see how this worked for the Springboks. Now, one of the things I like about the South African team is their ability to be able to call it no matter who goes on and off the field. And for R.G. Snyman replacing Ebden Etzebeth was a big call for me. Etzebeth, fantastic talisman for South Africa, and obviously by bringing him off, you're making a statement. And R.G. Snyman, I have to say, has been playing wonderful in this Rugby World Cup. The Viking has just been in everything whenever he's come on, and he's an impact player, isn't he? He comes on and he can really, really make a difference. But we didn't have to wait long for more changes from South Africa, and this time it was Kitsoff off and Oxnard coming on, which was a big move to try and get some dominance in that scrum, which wasn't happening up until the 50th minute of this game. So another big call from the South African coaching staff as well. And then Kwagga Smith and Dion Fourie come on as well a couple of minutes later. So the South Africans were emptying that bench, and I just thought, wow, this is such a huge call with still 30 odd minutes to go in the game, and any potential injury, South Africa could see themselves really, really short as far as cover goes. But it was an interesting move from the South African coaching staff. but it wasn't having too much of a big impact on the scoreboard. England was still in the lead 12 points to 6 at that stage, and they were still playing the type of game that they wanted to play. South Africa were getting more opportunities, and Andre Pollard was starting to make things look different with his strategic kicking in play, but it wasn't resulting in scoreboard change at that particular time of the game, leading up to 50 minutes. And then they say that great players change the course of games, and in the 53rd minute, when nobody was expecting it, from 48 meters out, Owen Farrell got the ball back from Alex Mitchell and took a pop at a drop goal in those conditions. Absolutely fantastic. And it was an amazing kick. It never looked like missing, and in fact he had probably another 10 meters on it as well if he'd wanted to. So a great drop goal, and probably South Africa weren't expecting that as well. They definitely weren't marking up in defence for it, and Owen Farrell slotted that great drop goal. England out to 15 points to 6, and now there was 9 points in it with just over 26 minutes to go in this game. Was this going to be South Africa's exit from the Rugby World Cup? This England team were dialing in a strategy that were really working, and at this stage the South African replacements weren't making any difference on the scoreboard. So the third quarter of the game came to an end between 40 and 60 minutes. England had scored 3 points to 0 on the scoreboard, and I gave England that quarter as well. So far in the game, they'd won the first 3 quarters of the game, according to me, just by their strategy being effective, them scoring points on the scoreboard, and keeping South Africa to very limited choices of what they were able to do around the field. And when South Africa tried to go wide with the ball, they'd drop it, they'd have a bad pass, or they'd knock the ball on, and you could start to see that they were getting a little bit rattled. So a 9-point lead to England with 20 minutes to go, and South Africa had to score twice, which was really going to be putting some pressure on them. But as we started that last quarter of the game, something really significant happened, and it was in a scrum in the 62nd minute mark. And the significant thing that happened in that scrum was England popped up in the scrum, and it was the first time that we'd seen the South Africans starting to get some dominance in that forward area. And I started to think, well, okay, this could be a turning point, or a chance at least for South Africa to get some better possession in this game, and the bomb squad were finally coming to fruition and helping South Africa get a little bit of dominance in terms of ball retention and opportunity to go forward in this game. And then moments later, a scrum penalty to South Africa, and Ben O'Keefe could start to see that South African scrum was getting some dominance. Now Ollie Chisholm had come on for England, and this was one of the worrying concerns for England, I think, as they went into this game, and that's why Steve Borthwick decided to start Martin in the lock with Maro Itoje, because he was wanting to put as much pressure on that South African forward pack as he could in the beginning of this game. But one of the Achilles heels for England was going to be when that bench came on, and whether or not Ollie Chisholm was going to be able to create that tight 5 impact that Martin did when he was on the field. And it showed at that particular stage of the game that the South Africans were getting some dominance. 68th minute of the game, and we saw Billy Vunipola come on, Tom Curry go off. Finally, he wasn't able to continue in the game. Injuries getting better on him, he was limping, as well as that head knock as well. So he'd put in a huge effort for those nearly 70 minutes of this game. And then in the 69th minute of the game, a huge moment as South Africa went down into English territory. They got a line out not far out from the English line and got their rolling maul going, and Dion Foree took off with a charge outside of the maul. England weren't marking up. The ball came back to Faf de Klerk. He found R.G. Snyman running off, first man in towards the line, and there was no way that England were going to stop the Viking just a metre or so out from their goal line. Snyman went over, put the ball down over the line, and South Africa were back in this game by scoring the first try in this semi-final, number 2. So by the time that Andre Pollard stepped up to hit the conversion, over 70 minutes had come up on the clock in this game. Pollard got the conversion over, so we were back to 15 points to 13, a 2-point game with 10 minutes left. And was that Owen Farrell disciplinary issue on the halfway now starting to look like a big problem for England? He gave away those 3 points, of course. So South Africa back within 2 points, and there was now starting to be belief in the Springboks team that maybe they could just pull off a miracle at the end of this game. Now, hindsight's a wonderful thing, and there's a lot of times during games where we say, well, we would have done that differently and we could have done this differently, but in the 75th minute of this game, something very significant happened, and I just want to bring your attention to it. Andre Pollard kicked from inside his 22. It went right down towards the English 22 on the opposite side of the field, where Freddie Stewart was perfectly positioned. He caught the ball, and he had an opportunity to put that ball back deep down into South African territory, inside their 22, and probably had a good chance of getting the ball near touch if he had tried. However, he chose to put an up and under in and chase the ball. And at that particular time, the ball came down close to the halfway line. So instead of Stewart going for distance and putting South Africa back down deep into their territory, where they would have had only two options: one, kick for touch, or two, try and run a long range try attempt with only 4 or so minutes left on the clock. That's what the options would have been for South Africa. But Freddie Stewart put a high ball up and under. He chased the ball. It only came down on the halfway line, and then 1 minute later an ensuing scrum went to the South Africans. They earned that penalty from the scrum, and 48 meters out, Andre Pollard got the opportunity in the 76th minute to be the hero again for South Africa at a Rugby World Cup. A decision by Freddie Stewart that he's probably looked back on 100 times already and thought, if only. Well, he didn't. South Africa got the opportunity. Andre Pollard, cool as a cucumber, put that amazing penalty kick over to put South Africa in the lead for the first time in this game with only a couple of minutes remaining. South Africa 16, England 15. You know, when Schneemann scored that try in the 69th minute, you just knew that South Africa believed that they could win this game and we're back England. And unfortunately for England, it was just that last few minutes of this game. They'd played the perfect strategy, and a couple of those little ill-disciplined things once again in their game making the difference. And as we've seen throughout this entire World Cup, these games are won and lost by inches, aren't they? Just split decisions that are made either way. If Owen Farrell hadn't given away or mouthed off and given that stupid penalty away 10 meters more down the field so Manny Lebok could get that goal, this game result would have been very different, as we would have seen last week against France as well. But the Springboks team, they know how to win. They're world champions for a reason, and they've done it now twice in these last two games at the death of the particular game. So England weren't able to get over the line at all in that last 2 minutes of the game. South Africa put crushing defence back on again, like we saw them do against France in the last minute of that game. And as the final whistle rang from Ben O'Keefe, everybody in the ground was absolutely astounded with the South African comeback in this game. Their fans went absolutely crazy across the world, that's for sure. And their English hearts started to bleed, as they really deserved something from this game. It was an incredible performance by England. As I said all along, they didn't play pretty rugby, but they were here to win a rugby semi-final. They played out of their skin. For all those people that had voted, 91% of them voting for South Africa on my community page, I'm sure at the 70th minute of this game you were very nervous about the outcome of this game. No matter how much you believed in this South African team, England were doing the job on them at that particular stage. But these games are 80 minutes long, and how many times have we seen it in this Rugby World Cup where teams have been able to grab wins in the last minute or two of games? It's been absolutely fantastic. England should take a lot away from this game. I think the whole team, the whole 23 in the squad, played a fantastic game for England. They deserved to be in this semi-final based on that performance alone. In those conditions, they played it perfectly. They brought the game to South Africa, and you know what they said? They said, if you're good enough to beat us at our strategy, then you deserve to win. And that's what it was. It was a game of inches in the end, and it was Andre Pollard, of course, who was able to secure this one for South Africa. Another thought I'd like to share before closing this video about this game was the coaching staff of the South African team. They never stop surprising you, do they? Jacques Nienaber and Rassie Erasmus, what a team they are. And their strategic intent, their ploys, their plays, the way they go about managing games, it's absolutely phenomenal. And they always find the key to unlock a successful game for South Africa, and they did it again in this game. Who would have thought bringing Andre Pollard on in 30 minutes and then dumping half of the subs on just after half time would have made the difference in this game, but it did, and it was a strategic genius from the South African coach box again that helped them win this game. So a huge kudos to them. That's why they're so dangerous, this South African team. They play together, they work together, they think together, and they come out with the results, and you can never ever underestimate what they're going to bring to a game. A rugby game is 80 minutes. You have the opportunity to change it in the last few minutes, and we've seen the last 2 weeks against France first of all, and now against England, that you never ever give up against this South African team. It wasn't the open flowing game of rugby, the conditions didn't allow that, but also the strategic intent. It was like a chess game throughout. It was brilliantly played for England for 75 minutes of that game, and then South Africa were able to do their thing, which is be a champion team at the champion time of the game. So South Africa go through to the next weekend's Rugby World Cup final, where they're going to be playing New Zealand, their old foe. And if you haven't checked out my video yet on the All Blacks semi-final against Argentina, don't forget to do that. And if you like my content, please hit the subscribe button. I'd love to have you as part of my Inside Rugby global community. We're getting bigger and bigger here. We've got people from countries all over the rugby playing world, and it's great to have you here with us. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up as well, and to give it a like and a share. Now, going through some of the players from both teams, well, as I said, for England, I've got to say 23 of them, they all played fantastically well in this particular game. And Freddie Stewart, despite what I thought was a mistake there at the end of the game, probably costing England this game, I think he was great under the high ball, did that all well all day for England. And it was really the forwards though for England that impressed me so much in this game. And as I mentioned them before, Tom Curry until he went off. Ben Earl was fantastic. He's been playing awesome rugby. Courtney Laws was good today. Maro Itoje was, from that time he was singing the national anthem, he was big in there. And a big shout out to the English front row. I thought they played very well in these scrums until the bomb squad came on, and Ox Nishay was the man that changed it, I think, for South Africa. He was really able to put some dominance into that front row for the Springboks and started to pop the English scrum where they started to have some problems. For South Africa, I think Faf de Klerk coming on when he did made a difference. Andre Pollard, of course, was the key to it all, unlocking the code for South Africa, and R.G. Schneemann as well. So again, the South African bench, so important and so big in this game, and not just for their brute power but for their experience, for their mindset, and getting South Africa through that last 10 minutes of this game. It built belief in the players, it built belief in what they were doing from a strategic point of view, and eventually it paid off with them scoring that try in the 69th minute. But I think everybody would love to have an Andre Pollard on their team when it goes into a Rugby World Cup final. South Africa is going to have that next weekend. A dream fairy tale end for Andre Pollard. Let's face it, he wasn't even in the squad when the World Cup got underway. He's come in and he's now set up South Africa to go through and play against the All Blacks at the Stade de France next Saturday night. So let me know your comments about this game. Were you on the edge of your seat all the way through, whether you're an English or a South African supporter of this one? I'd like to hear from you in the comments. Give me your thoughts on my analysis. Did I miss anything out? I'm sure I did. And you can tell me in the comments. I'll be back again soon. We've got a hectic week coming up as we get ready for this amazing Rugby World Cup final from Paris. And I'll be back again with some more videos as we build into the week. Until then, stay safe, everybody, stay well. And again, thank you very much for your kind wishes and thoughts. I'm back, we're getting into it. Let's go. We've got a Rugby World Cup to finish together. Bye for now.